All right, it's time to add our first weapon. So in order to do that, what we need to do is go into our prefabs folder. We're going to find the weapons folder, and you're going to see three weapons here, as well as this bullet hole prefab. We can ignore the bullet hole prefab, but what we want to find is the pistol. So we're going to click on the pistol, and we're going to drag that out and put it right on top of the main camera in our hierarchy. And if you can't see that, make sure you expand your player first and then drag that out into the main camera. And we're going to see that should pop it right on top of the camera for us. Now, if we use our movement gizmo and pull this out, we're going to see it right there. And we want to make sure this is lined up properly with our camera. So if we click on the camera, we'll see that our camera is currently facing this way. We can tell by this, this is called as a view frustrum. And we can see it going in like this triangle shape or this pyramid shape. And this is positive Z direction. So we want to make sure our camera or our gun is visible on the camera. And if you look in the main camera preview right here, we currently can't see it. So what we need to do is select our pistol here. And we're going to use our movement gizmo to move it over in front of our camera. And it's also facing the wrong way currently. So we need to rotate this about 90 degrees to the left here. So what we're going to do is go to this Y rotation value in our transform component. And we're just going to type 90. And we're going to notice it's spun the wrong way. So we're going to make that a negative 90. And now you should see it perfectly right there for us. And if we go to our game view to check where it's a little bit centered, so I'm going to move it over to the right, again, using this movement gizmo. And we'll see how that looks. I'm just going to move it a little bit back. I like the gun to look nice and close. You can tweak this to look however you want. I think that looks pretty good right there. So once we've got all that aligned, we can call that good. What we now want to do is go back into our resources folder, go to scripts and created, and we're going to create a new C# script called pistol. And what we need to do right out of the gate is drag pistol onto our pistol game object. And now if we select pistol, we'll see pistol in here. And we're going to open up this script. And the first thing we need to do is, just like we did for player inventory, we need to replace mono behavior here with weapon. So we're going to replace weapon just like that. And now you're going to see these green underlines. That means that we're already using start and update in the parent class, so we can delete them because we're not going to use them here. Next up, what we want to do is we're going to write the code that handles actually firing our gun. So what we're going to say is public override void fire. So you'll remember we have that fire script in weapon, and it's actually it should automatically, if you have autocomplete and stuff set up, it should automatically add base.fire here. If it does not automatically add base.fire inside your brackets, make sure you type this. This is important to make sure that we actually are doing the stuff like subtracting our current ammo from the clip and playing the sounds and all that stuff. So we're going to say base.fire. Then what we're going to say is if current clip, which is that variable from the weapon script, if current clip is greater than or equal to 0, we're going to say raycast hit. Actually, this should be current clip is greater than 0. Excuse me. We're going to say raycast hit. And that's going to represent our data from that raycast we talked about in the bonus step of week 1. Then we're going to say physics.raycast, which if you didn't do the bonus that last week, I'll explain this again. Raycasts are essentially physics things that we can do that allows us to fire what's called a ray, which is a straight line. You can think of it like a laser beam, that when it hits something, it's going to tell us a lot of information about what it hit, where it hit it, how it hit it, and we can use that to communicate to, for example, an enemy that it's been shot and to deal damage to it. So what we're going to do is say physics.raycast cameratrans.position cameratrans.forward, because we want to go in the direction. This is going to fire it from our camera, and then in the forward direction, so straight out of our camera. We're going to say out hit, which is going to tell this raycast hit variable. It's going to send the information about what we're hitting to that variable. We're going to say out.hit or out.hit 100, comma lm. And you're going to see that layer mask is a variable that we need to establish because we're getting our red underline here. So at the top, we're going to say public layer mask lm and add our semicolon. We can go ahead and save our script here because what we actually need to do is make another script that we're not going to fill out the script just yet, but we're going to reference it here. And I think it'll be a little bit easier if we at least establish the script now, and then we can go back and edit it in a later step. So what we need to do is go back to our editor, and in our created folder here, we're going to hit create C# script damageable. So that's DAMAGEABLE. And once we have that, we can leave it as is. We don't need to open it because, like I said, we're gonna mess with that one a little bit later. But we do need it to make our pistol function at least somewhat properly. Next, we're gonna say damageable. So that script we just made, damageable target equals to null, semicolon. And if you are getting a red line there, that means you didn't name that script properly, or you may have not named it in a way where that new behavior script thing is replaced. So make sure if you did mess that up, just make sure you fix the class name inside the damageable file. And then inside that, or underneath that, I should say, we're going to say if hit.collider is not equal to null. So that means if we're hitting something that has a collider, we're going to say target equals hit.collider.gameObject.get components. That's the game object that we hit. We're going to get a component from that. We're going to get the damageable component. So now we have that target has a value assigned to it, that damageable component. And again, we're going to fill that out later, so you'll have a better idea as to what it's doing there. And we're going to say lc.fire laser color, comma hit dot point, and semicolon there. And then outside of our brackets, we're going to say else semicolon, or not semicolon, but our curly brackets, lc.fire laser color camera trans dot forward. So what this is saying is if we hit something, we're going to fire our laser at the thing we hit, and if we didn't hit something, then we're just going to fire it in the forward direction. Now outside of our else statement, we're going to say if target is not equal to null, and then our open and close brackets. And so we're going to write a line here that's referencing something we'll add to damageable later. We don't actually have the thing in damageable that we need to call. So what we're going to do is write a comment version of a line because we know that we're going to add this thing later on, that once we add it, we can come back and make this line of code work. So what the comment is going to do, which is this double forward slash here, which is the key next to shift on the right side of your keyboard, we're going to add two of those. And what we're going to say is target.take damage with a capital T and a capital D, damage per bullet with a capital P and B, close parentheses and semicolon. So again, this line of code is actually going to have function later on, but by adding this comment here, we can prevent it from causing errors when this take damage method doesn't exist yet. And this is really useful to know how to do because sometimes you're writing a script or writing code to do something, but it's reliant on another step that you haven't been able to get to yet. So you know what that thing is going to do and the value it's going to require, but it just doesn't exist yet. So by commenting it out, we can kind of plan ahead in that regard. So if that is equal to null, we want to make the target take damage, and again, we'll set that up in a later step. But if it is null, that is, if our target that we hit does not have this component, this value will be null. And what we want to do is make one of those bullet holes that you saw in the prefab section. So we're going to say GameObject BH is equal to instantiate. This is a method that will create a game object for us. We're going to say instantiate, and then in some angled brackets, we're going to say game object. And then parentheses after the game object here, we're going to say bullet hole. And that's a variable that's in our weapon script that's going to hold the prefab for our bullet hole there. And we're going to say bh.transform.position is equal to hit.point plus hit.normal times 0.01f. And the normal here is actually going to be a vector or a line coming from the point we hit that's coming straight out of it. So think of it like if you shot a wall, the line would be pointing back at you from the wall. And that's because we want this bullet hole to be on the wall but not inside it. So we're moving it out of the wall by 0.01 to make it visible to us in the game. Last thing we need to do is say bh.transform.lookat. And in parentheses here, we're going to say bh.transform.position plus hit.normal. And that's going to tell the bullet hole to rotate so that it's also looking away from the wall it hits, which means, again, that we'll be able to see it no matter where we hit a wall. The last thing we need to add inside this script here and make sure we're inside, not inside of fire, but we are inside our class. We're going to hit enter after the fire bracket here. We're going to say public override void process inputs. And again, that's because we want that reload input from the weapon script, but we want to add our own little bit of code here. So we got to make sure that base.process inputs is inside the brackets. And then we're going to say if input.get mouse button down, and then parentheses 0, because 0 represents our left mouse button, and we are not is reloading. If we're doing all that, then we want to fire. With all of that set up, now if we hit the mouse button, we will actually shoot our laser beam out of our pistol. And we can test this by going back over to our pistol, clicking on it, and we have to fill out some information here before we can properly actually shoot this thing. So I'm going to pick a laser color. I think red looks good for the pistol, so I'll pick red. And one important thing to note is that when you select a color, this alpha value, the A value here, is always going to be set to 0 by default. If it's set to 0, the laser will be invisible. So we want to drag this slider all the way to the right, or just change this number to say 255. That'll make sure that the laser is actually visible. Now we need to drop into our values here. We're going to say damage per bullet is 5 because we want to deal 5 damage every shot. Current ammo, I'm going to set it to a nice 80. I'm going to say the max clip is 10. And that's just how much ammo you can have in the gun at any time. I'm also going to start the player off with 10 bullets loaded into their clip. Ammo to add, this is the amount of ammo that they will have every time they pick up this gun. Generally speaking, I'm going to set this to the same thing as I start their current ammo at. So I'm going to change this from 100 to 80. And I'm going to keep reload delay at 1. I'm going to set layer mask here to terrain, as well as I think we want default here. That should work. Actually, what we can do to check that is, we want it to be able to hit the terrain and our enemies, and that's pretty much it. So we're just going to check what layer our enemy prefabs are on. It does look like they're on the default layer. So I can keep that to default and trigger. Or I'm sorry, we don't want trigger, we want terrain. Cool, so those are the two things that our bullets can hit. And then lastly, we need to fill out our UI stuff. So we're going to open our canvas up. We're going to drop this clip text into clip UI. We're going to drop ammo text into ammo UI. And then finally, we're going to go into our prefabs folder. And in the weapons folder, we're going to grab the bullet hole prefab and place that in the bullet hole field. Now, if I hit play, I've got my gun selected here. And if I shoot, oh, nothing happens. I wonder why that is. Let's take a look. Let's see what's happening. So I'm actually going to open my console. I'm going to hit Window, General, Console. And it says value cannot be null. And it says that's at line in weapon.fire at line 66. Let's see what that is. Oh, it says as.play is the value that's null. And what a value being null tells us is that there's no actual value there. And if as equals null, that means our get component failed, which means that we are missing our audio source component. So all we need to do to fix that is go into our audio or our pistol here and add the audio source component. And the final step we need to do is actually add the audio clip that represents our guns firing. So we're going to go back into our resources folder again, go to the sounds folder and weapons, and make sure with our pistol selected, we grab the one that says pistol sound and drop that into audio clip. Now if I hit play and shoot, see that we're firing lasers. And if you look closely, you'll even see that at the spot where the laser appears or hits, that little bullet hole appears. And that's perfect because we want to make sure that we're impacting the environment when we're shooting our guns. And we can go ahead and reload, and you'll see the UI is updating and all that good stuff. So now what we can do is go ahead and press escape and stop playing. And we can go ahead, or wait, let's see. We're getting a null reference error. So again, why don't we go ahead and check that out together? Let's see, bullet sprite. And if we click on this, it'll take us to the part of the code. Oh, and this is why. So one thing that we need to add is the script is provided for you, but we want to prevent those bullet holes that we're spawning from clouding our hierarchy view. So we need to add a bullet holder game object to our scene to prevent that, because our script here is telling our bullet holes to move themselves under a game object. So we're going to right click in the hierarchy view, hit create empty, and rename this game object to bullet holder. And we don't have to worry about moving it or anything. It's perfectly fine wherever it goes by default. And now you'll see, if you're looking at the hierarchy view, if I shoot, there's just a drop-down arrow, and that's because those bullet holes are getting moved underneath that bullet holder there. And that also means that we don't have any errors now, so we are good to go ahead and move on to our next weapon.